People often think about conditions like depression and anxiety as problems with emotion. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about the role of thoughts and how thoughts can have a huge impact on how you feel. Hi everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about something called cognitive therapy, which is a form of therapy that really focuses on thinking patterns and how the way you think influences and affects the way you feel and your emotional reactions to various situations. But before I get into that, just a couple of disclaimers to go over. I'm a registered psychologist in the province of British Columbia, Canada, and this video is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for advice from your doctor or mental health professional. Now, with those two things out of the way, let's start talking about cognitive therapy and the role that thoughts play in how you feel. Now, when I first talk to my clients about cognitive therapy, I like to start off the discussion with almost like a philosophical point. And the idea is that none of us actually live in the real world. We live in our perception of what's going on. So the world that we experience is based on how we interpret and how we understand what's going on around us. Now, for the most part, the way we interpret the world is generally consistent with how the world is. But when a person is experiencing depression or anxiety, the way they view or think about the world can be skewed or an exaggerated extreme of what's actually happening. And that can contribute to excessive anxiety or excessive depression or mood symptoms. So I want you to think about how you typically experience emotion. Now, usually when we experience emotion, there's a situation. Something happens, and it's that something that happens that triggers my emotional response to it. So my friend says something mean to me, and I feel really upset because of what my friend said to me. I'm late for a meeting and I feel really anxious because I'm late for the meeting. So the way we experience our emotion is typically there's a situation that happens and it's the situation that causes our emotional reaction. Now, that seems to make a lot of sense. So my emotions are directly tied to what's happening. Now, the problem is this is kind of a simplistic way of understanding how we experience emotion. It doesn't explain why sometimes our emotions are inconsistent with what's actually going on, and it doesn't explain why different people react to the exact same situations in different ways. So let me give you a few examples. So suppose I'm out going for a walk one day, and I'm outside and it's a beautiful sunny day, and I feel totally at peace, totally calm, totally at ease as I'm walking down the sidewalk. Now, unbeknownst to me, they're raising a grand piano into the 15th floor window of the apartment building above me, and the rope that's holding up the piano has snapped, and so that piano is coming crashing down and is about to smush me. Now, I don't see the grand piano. I'm just walking on the street. So the situation in that case is that I'm in grave danger. Something bad is about to happen to me. But my emotional reaction and my emotional response in that situation is one of peace and tranquility and calm. It's not consistent with what's actually happening. Think about it the other way. Suppose I'm in a movie theater and I'm watching a really intense horror movie. A really scary part of the movie, guy jumps out of the shower with a big knife and I react. My heart's racing, my palms are sweaty. I feel terrified. So my emotional reaction in that situation is one of fear and terror. But the situation is that I'm in a big comfy room in a big comfortable chair surrounded by people, and I've got a bag of popcorn in my lap. That is not a situation that should trigger that level of fear and terror. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes people can react to the exact same situation in totally different ways. So suppose one day I'm going for a walk, and just as I'm about to leave my front door, I hear on the radio that it's squirrel season and that the squirrels are out foraging for nuts. I don't think too much of it. Must be a slow news day if they're talking about squirrels, and I go on my way. So now I'm walking through the forest and looking around, and off in the distance I hear some leaves rustling. What am I likely to think it is? Well, I'm likely to think it's squirrels. And so I get these warm, fuzzy, commune with nature feelings because I think about how the cute squirrels are foraging for their nuts, and I go on my way feeling good about my walk. Now, the exact same situation, except this time, as I'm about to leave my front door, I hear on the radio that there's a mountain lion in my neighborhood, and the mountain lion has attacked a number of people. So they're warning people to be very careful and very cautious in my area. So now as I'm walking, I'm going through the forest and I'm looking around and trying to enjoy my walk, but I hear some leaves rustling off in the distance. What am I likely to think it is? Well, a mountain lion. How am I likely to feel? Well, probably pretty scared, probably pretty anxious and terrified because I'm worried that I might be attacked by the mountain lion. Now notice, in the two scenarios, the exact same thing is happening. I'm walking down a path and I hear some leaves rustling off in the distance. In the first scenario, I feel these warm, commune with nature feelings. In the second scenario, I feel terrified and scared. So the key is, it's not the leaves that are rustling off in the distance that are causing my emotional reaction. What's causing my emotional reaction is the way I'm interpreting the leaves rustling in the distance. If I interpret the leaves rustling in the distance as squirrels, I'm going to feel warm, fuzzy feelings. If I interpret the leaves rustling off in the distance as the mountain lion, I'm going to be afraid. So our model for understanding emotion is actually a lot more complicated than just situation happens and that causes my emotional reaction. There's a step that we often don't think about, and that's our interpretation. So there's a situation that occurs, I interpret the situation, and based on my interpretation of the situation, I experience a certain emotional response. So it's not the situation that causes my emotional response, it's the interpretation. And the interpretation is how we think. That's our thoughts. It's the black box in our head that we're processing this information to determine how we should feel about it. Now, the thing is, with anxiety, with depression, with pretty much any emotional state, we typically aren't aware of the interpretation part of this model. We just experience situation, emotional response. But the interpretation is key, but it's not something we're necessarily aware of. And we call this automatic thinking. That sometimes you can be thinking about something and not even realize that you're thinking about it. So this is a bit of a weird concept for a lot of people to fully kind of wrap their head around, is how can I be thinking about something but not be aware that I'm thinking about it? Well, reality is it happens all the time. So think about the first time you got behind the wheel of an automobile and you went for your first drive. Do you remember all of the things you had to be aware of? right? Hands at 2 and 10 o'clock, and I needed to remember when to step on the clutch and to shift gears, and I need to be paying attention to all the street signs and checking my rear view mirror and checking the side mirrors and remembering what all the street signs meant and when the lights are turning red and that car coming up on my left-hand side and remembering where I'm going. It was all overwhelming because I had to be aware of all of these things all at once. So my mind is processing all of that information. And when you first start driving, you can feel overwhelmed with all of the information you have to be thinking about, all of the information you have to be processing. But have you ever had an experience where you're driving somewhere and you're getting from point A to point B, and you get to your destination and you don't even remember the drive? You don't even remember how you got there? Well, your mind still had to be processing all of that information. Your mind still had to be processing where you're going, when to step on the gas pedal, when to step on the brake pedal, being aware of all the traffic around you. Your mind still had to be thinking about all of that stuff, but you weren't consciously aware of it. Now, this ability to think automatically is actually really adaptive because it can help us multitask. So I can be driving to a meeting, and rather than focusing on or thinking about when I shift gears from second to third, I can be thinking about what I'm going to be saying at the meeting. So that's much more important than, when to shift gears. But because my mind is able to process that information outside of my awareness, it helps me to do two things in my mind at once. So in day-to-day life, this ability to think without realizing I'm thinking is actually really adaptive. It only becomes problematic when we're talking about things like depression, things like anxiety, when we may be having all sorts of negative or exaggerated thoughts that fuel and drive feelings of depression, feelings of anxiety, and not even be aware of it. And if you're not aware of negative thinking patterns that are contributing to depression, that are contributing to anxiety, you can't really do much about it. And that's where cognitive therapy comes in. Cognitive therapy is all about getting a better understanding and being a better awareness of what it is that you're thinking about in these negative emotional states, and being able to challenge those thoughts and to be able to think about those thoughts in a more realistic way. So this is just an introduction to cognitive therapy. I'm going to be doing a lot of videos fully detailing out some of the characteristics of cognitive therapy and ways that you can use cognitive therapy to help manage and regulate negative emotional states. So I hope you'll stay tuned and keep an eye out for those videos. So that's all for today's video. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and ideas about cognitive therapy. If you've ever experienced it, or if you're interested in learning more about it, please leave me some questions and comments down below. I hope you're enjoying my videos, and if you'd like to see more, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and you'll be alerted every week when I post a new video. So that's all for today's video. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video, and I will see you in the next one.